Hey there, YouTube. Welcome back to the Allegheny Northern in N scale. And today we're going to do a video on getting started in the hobby. And I know it's kind of an interesting topic because, well, we're very well beyond getting started here in the Allegheny Northern. But I think this hobby needs some new blood and it needs some new people to get started. And if you're one of those people that's sitting on the bench waiting for your opportunity is now. So let's show you how to get started. I got started in the hobby like everybody did. I got a train set some 20 some years ago when I was just a little kid, and it sparked an entire revolution that has led to all of this glory in the basement. And it started with a Bachmann train set. This is it right here. Okay, that little guy, he got me started in what would later become pretty much a money pit for what I foresee as the rest of my life. And I haven't looked back. Well, I have looked back a few times, and that's the pitfalls I want you to avoid. Don't make the mistakes that I did. So let's talk about some of the good things that happened, some of the bad things that happened. When I started, I was ahead of YouTube, well ahead of YouTube. And my parents I was begging them to be able to put up a layout and build some scenery, and I wanted to do that. And finally, they said, "All right, if you're going to try to build a layout, you got to know what you're doing. We got to get you educated." They got me 2 books. So my 2 books were Atlas's Introduction to N-Scale Model Railroading and 9 N-Scale Railroads. I built a lot of the railroads that are in this book. I think 2 of them actually became layouts with scenery. The rest of them were just taken apart with sectional atlas track. Not even the stuff on the roadbed, actual sectional atlas track. But the reason the books were so good was because it showed you how to do everything. So it showed you the power pack, it showed you either the connector, the selector, the switch machines, and it showed you how to wire them most importantly. This is where I learned to do all of my wiring and all of my layouts up until this one were DC standard. All of my locomotives were DC, and it wasn't until I got to this size layout that I went, holy crap, this DC thing is not working anymore. So by the time I converted to DCC, I had over 70 locomotives that needed to be upgraded. And yes, it was a pain. So, but starting off with the train set, starting off with this book, my first advice is get some books. I know that YouTube's here. It's a great source. All of us content creators love you for watching us, but there's nothing like the book that you can actually see everything. It's all detailed out nicely. You can wire from here. You can learn everything from here. So this is a great source to start with. A lot of folks they don't ask me. They ask me about my track plan. And I know I haven't done it yet. I just haven't had the time. It's something I'm putting off. But I can tell you that this layout, so this whole thing, started off as the Model Railroaders project layout, the Salt Lake route. And a lot of the track configuration down here is still intact for the Salt Lake route. This would be the back side of it. You would be standing on that side in the way they built it. And when I moved my layout down here into the basement, part of the Salt Lake route stayed there. Some of it went over to there. Some of it's behind me. A lot of it got filled in with different stuff, so it doesn't really look like the Salt Lake route anymore. But that's where it started. So humble beginnings for this layout. But my advice is, starting out, get a book, watch YouTube, but get a book. Find out how you do things. Have something that you can come back and reference and learn how to do these things. It's going to go a very long way in helping you, especially if you've got kids that you're trying to get involved. This gives them something tangible that they can hold and that they can work on with you. And so with kids, grandkids, this is an excellent way to start. Start with a book. It's good to get away from the screen every now and then anyway. Okay, so let's talk rolling stock. Now, rolling stock, I'm going to be a little nitpicky here, and you're just going to have to deal with me. I get a lot of enjoyment out of watching my trains run. So etched metal platforms, knuckle couplers, nice looking trucks, great printed detail, excellent fine rivet detail, how to open doors, all of that sort of stuff. This means a lot to me. That's what I'm looking for. When you buy the inexpensive stuff, you don't get that. You get bulky features, you get very little detail, you get childhood me's version of trying to do some graffiti on a car. You can see, look how bulky that printing is. Like that's not what you want to see. So I prefer to get a little bit nicer rolling stock. Now I can tell you that this car right here, and you're not gonna believe me, but when I bought it, yep, $2.99. That's what I paid for it. $2.99. But I did get a $2.99 boxcar. Now I'm gonna take you over to the $29.99 boxcar, and you get a lot more. So if you're starting to expand your fleet and you want to kind of get somewhere, you can always go with the cheap boxcar. It'll get you started. You can get a lot of train for not a lot of cash, but for me, it's about this detail, and I want this detail. So consider that when you're buying your stuff. My preference and my advice to you would be, if it's about watching the trains for you and it's not just about the scenery or something else, you're going to be disappointed if you bring this home and then you find this later, and before you know it, you bought this and then you bought this, and now you spent twice, but you're really only going to run one boxcar. So my advice, a little contrarian, but if you're going to start, spend the money where it's going to bring you the most joy. And if that's in the rolling stock and the trains, make sure you get good quality. And if you go, hey, brother, I hear you, I appreciate you and what you're saying, and I really want to have the $30 boxcar, but I can't afford a $30 boxcar, so where did you get the $3 boxcar at? I can tell you from a hobby shop that's no longer in business. So don't know where you find a $3 boxcar in $23. But that brings me to my next point. When you're spending your model railroading dollars, locomotives are big. And this is a Concord, yes, Concord switcher locomotive. I don't even know if I has on here what type it is. It's an SW1200. So I got you zoomed in here. Look at the cab detail. And you're saying, what cab detail? And yes, that is my point. There is no cab detail. There's not even an inside. There's not even glass in the window there. That is the weight on the locomotive. Actually, this entire shell is full of weight. There's no space that I can even route out for a decoder. I know, I tried, but it is 100% shell. Take a look at the trucks on these two locomotives. One on the right, the Norfolk Southern, is an Atlas. Obviously, that one is a Concord. I'm going to try to get this down here. I know there are two different types of locomotives, an MP15 versus the SW1200, but just look at the difference in the detail, and a lot more on the Atlas. Although this is not a bad locomotive, and it served me well for a good number of years, when I got the Atlas, there just was no comparing it. You get a lot more fine details. You get a lot more printed labels as far as the warnings and the signs. And I know it's kind of small, and I know it's really dirty, but you get the idea. And its sister there is just the same, and actually just as dirty. So I need to do a little dusting down here. But you understand what I'm saying. You're getting a lot more detail on your locomotive. Now you go, hey, it's not always about the detail, and you are absolutely right. The reason I want to point out the difference in locomotives is this guy, he runs like a $30 locomotive. Very jerky. You got to put the power up really, really high. You're not getting the slow speed that you would have for a switcher, it jerks around a lot. It just doesn't perform very well, and that's just the mechanism. That's the nature of the beast. Whereas even the Atlas, which is not by any stretch of imagination one of the more expensive brands that I purchase, it runs way better. I can get excellent slow speed control with this. I converted it to DCC, and it is the locomotive. So, in a matchup, these two locomotives are unparalleled. So if you have to spend money somewhere, I urge you to spend your money in your locomotive. Spend it where it's going to make the most impact. And if you've got to have a $200 locomotive pulling a $2 boxcar, so be it. But if you will get more enjoyment out of a good running locomotive, and you'll get less frustration, be more likely to stay in the hobby, go with the more expensive locomotive, the better built locomotive. Trust me, that's where to put your dollars. Out of everything that I tell you today, regardless of the track and control systems, make sure you get a good quality locomotive. And if you want to know my opinion on what a good quality locomotive is, leave a comment down below. I'll let you know what I think is a good quality locomotive. Okay, the reason I let this locomotive run through its startup sequence is because I wanted you to hear the sounds that you can get from an N-scale locomotive. And I was not a proponent of N-scale sound. I thought the speakers were too small. I thought the sounds were too tinny. And I thought, well, quite frankly, it just sucked. I actually considered piping diesel sounds through the basement so that you would get that big throaty roar, although it wouldn't be directly connected to a locomotive. I got to tell you, I've come about full direction here on this one, and if you are going to buy a locomotive and you're going to do DCC to start, then get the sound option. You're not going to regret it. It adds a whole nother dimension to the hobby, and it's well worth the extra dollar that you're going to spend. I know some people like to put the decoders in themselves. I don't. I don't find any enjoyment in that, so I like to buy it with them already ready to go. So take a look there. You see the separately applied grabs. Really makes a difference on the model. And now you're saying, okay, well, you already told me to buy the more expensive locomotive. Now you're telling me to buy it with sound as well. What do you think I am, made of money? Yeah, I kind of warned you this is kind of an expensive hobby. If I didn't warn you, hey, guess what? This is kind of an expensive hobby, and I think this is where you want to put your money if you're talking about where to spend your modeling dollars. But there are options that make this a lot better. This is a Bachmann. It is a DCC sound on board. It's kind of like their well, it was my introduction to sound. This is the first locomotive that I got that had sound on it, and I want you to see the detail that's available on this thing. The separately applied details, the hoses, the cut levers, the MU details. It's a great little locomotive. It doesn't have the full capability of sounds that some of the other brands do, Broadway Limited, the Atlas, the Scale Trains. It doesn't have that kind of sound to it. It's got very basic sounds, but it adds sound. You can run the bell, the horn, and you hear the prime mover starting up, and it really adds a dimension to the layout that I didn't have before, and that's the one that got me hooked. That's the one that did me in. And I bought it at a train show for about $120. So for about the price of a DC converted locomotive, I got a DCC Sound. It's one of their sort of economy line locomotives. So you can absolutely start in sound in DCC for a very reasonable price. You just need to know where to find it, and your options will be a little bit more limited since you're trying to stay in that price range, but you can do it. And train shows are a great way to find good deals like that. So, to bring the locomotive portion of this to a close, spend your money on your locomotive. If you are an adult modeler and you're getting into this hobby seriously, spend the money, get the DCC system, get the DCC locomotives, get it with the sound. It's going to add a dimension that you're really going to love to the hobby, and you're going to keep on keeping on with it. You know, worry about the rolling stock, the structures, the vehicles, the people, and all that stuff later. Get yourself a good locomotive and get started. And that's going to lead us to the decision to go DC or DCC. Okay, first and foremost, there is no wrong answer to whether you go DC or DCC. Both systems work, both systems are reliable, both systems are time proven, so there's not an issue with either system. You get a lot more control and a lot more options, including sound, with DCC. And I'm saying that if you are a adult modeler getting into this seriously, then you should go DCC. The wiring is a lot simpler, but the components are a lot more expensive. However, the options for it are a lot more varied, and you get the option of a walk-around throttle and all the controls and the programming, especially being able to run locomotives, different trains on the same track in opposite directions, things like that. You just don't get with DC. And you don't have to worry about block control, and it really is a lot simpler on the wiring. It's a lot more complicated on the control end, but from the under the table wiring, I can show you right here. We're going to jump under the table here just a little bit, and you're going to see, possibly, right there, that's the wire. This is the bus line. This runs all the way around the layout, and it every now and then ties up to the layout up above. But that's all there is to it. There's no blocks. There's no nothing. It's right there. So let me take you over here and show you. My system started off as a very basic DCC system. This is the Zephyr Express from Digitrax. It has been expanded with two radio throttles. There's actually the radio receiver right there. And then when I expanded the layout, I did need to add a booster, so there's the booster in the back. All Digitrax. I'm very happy with the Digitrax system. I know there are others out there, NCE being one of them, and then I think TCS just came out with theirs. But I'm very happy with Digitrax. I will probably always stay Digitrax. It's served me very well. Very happy with it. Very user-friendly in programming. And you can get a DCC starter set. So that's just like my ancient Bachmann starter set. You can get a DCC starter set for around $500. It's going to be the Bachmann version, where you'll get a locomotive similar to the one that I just showed you. Subtract the command station and booster, and everything you need to get started in DCC in the hobby. So I know $500 is a lot, and that's big money. It's certainly more than a few $100, a $200 or $300 starter set of a DC version. But once again, if you're going to get into the hobby and be serious about it, my advice is to spend the money and go in that direction. You got to know your audience. I know I mentioned this before, but you got to know your audience. If you're giving this to small children, DCC is probably not a great option. Too many options, too many features, too many things that can get screwed up, too much detail. You're better off with a cheap toy store train set. But if you are giving this to an older person, then DCC is the way to go. I could spend hours telling you all of the various options that are available, all of the different manufacturers, which ones I recommend, which ones I don't, all based on experience. But quite frankly, I don't think you want to listen to me talk that long, and I don't want to really talk that long. So what I'm going to do is, in brief summary here, if you are an adult modeler and you're getting started, my recommendation is to spend your money and get nicer equipment. If you are limited in budget, spend that money on a good locomotive and let the other stuff trail. It doesn't matter whether you go DC or DCC, though I do recommend DCC and preferably something with sound equipped. I think it's going to keep you in the hobby a lot longer and keep your interest a lot better. If you are giving this to a child, then I would recommend a standard DC train set. may not recommend N scale unless they're an older child. If they're younger, definitely something that's going to be a little bit more robust, something either in HO scale or O scale would be good. If you think that your child or grandchild, whatever, may be a little bit more interested in trains and it may turn into something, then I would avoid toy store brand train sets and go for something of a little bit higher quality. So in that case, I would say avoid a low-end Bachmann or lifelike train set and go with something that's a more higher-end Bachmann or Atlas microtrain, something like that. Just realize that when you get with a little more expensive stuff, you get a little better detail and a little better care needs to be taken with it. This is an expensive hobby, I recognize that, and it starts with a single locomotive and a single loop of track before it turns into an entire basement layout. So my next step of advice in getting started is make sure you have the patience to do it, because it takes a very, very long time. And you know, when you see my layout, understand that I've been doing this for, well, close to 30 years, 25, 30 years. And so there is quite a bit of collecting, and most of the stuff from the early years is not rolling around on this layout. It's long since been retired. Some of it because it's too bad a shape and doesn't run anymore. Some of it because it just doesn't meet the standard anymore and it's been tucked away. But in any event, you know, this stuff is not necessarily designed to last, but it'll last you a long time, and you can get a lot of good years out of it if you take care of it and, you know, do what you need to do to maintain it and whatnot. So my advice is to start with that book. Get a book, read it, reference it. You can always use references on YouTube as well, now that that's a good, you know, available, viable option. Lots of good advice, lots of good people modeling. And if you are in the part where you've already got your train, your loop of track, and you're ready to start scenery, there are tons of folks doing how-to videos. Don't limit yourself to simply train folks. There are lots of people who are doing other stuff, doing dioramas, doing military stuff. They are using various scenery techniques which are adaptable to model scale railroading, and you can get some really cool ideas from those folks. So do not limit yourself to just thinking you need to watch model trains. There are other folks on YouTube that are also very good. If you would like to know any of my more particular preferences as far as what I would recommend getting started with, I'll be more than happy to address those comments. Go ahead and leave them down below. Got to give me a little bit of time to get back. Unfortunately, this is not my day job, so give me some time to get back, and I promise I will respond to as many comments as I can. But if you'd like to know which sets I recommend starting with or which brands I recommend, any of that stuff, I'm always more than willing to talk trains with anyone. So go ahead and leave me a comment. Hope this was valuable to you if you are thinking about starting off in the hobby. And if you need anything else, like I said, feel free to leave me a comment and I'll do my best to help you.